Anyway, so hello. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Devon Noel Lee, and there's my husband, and we are in two separate locations. I am freezing in New Mexico in my office, so I have a blanket covering me up. And
why don't you turn the heater on?
It doesn't reach the office.
Yes, there's a heater right there in the office.
Okay, now you can tell how we're definitely married, and this is a live show. So anyway, Andy, where are you tuning that in from?
I'm tuning in from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Awesome. And what are you doing then?
I'm sitting here talking with you.
So I'm really excited today to talk a little bit about online genealogy research questions. And all right, so the first question is a question that some of you on WikiTree may like to answer to. So go ahead and fill in away in your thoughts. And this one I think comes from Becca. I think that's how you say her name. Becca 18. Is it okay to copy and paste long biographies into WikiTree as long as I cite it? Andy, what do you think?
Well, there's lots of layers to this question. Which, just since I mentioned layers there, I have to give a shout out to Stephen Little, who's from someplace in Virginia. When I saw the name, I thought of Lord Farquaad in Shrek, but he's not from Lord Farquaad, Virginia. It's like Farqueer or something like that. But anyway, so first off, the question you should probably ask yourself is, do you actually have the rights to that biography? For instance, if it is something that you wrote, obviously you do. If it is something that your parents wrote and they're deceased and you are the inheritor, then yes, you also still have that. Same with your grandparents, great-grandparents on down the line. Now, once you get outside of that, then it's somebody else who actually owns the rights to that. Now, they may have no problem with you posting that on WikiTree with that citation, but you really have to find that out and figure that out. So, posting a full biography of somebody really gets into your copyright laws and understanding what it is that you can and what it is that you can't.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me pull this up on screen real quick. And so here's an example of a biography for Effingham Townley Jr., and you can see that there's a biography going on, and the biography is fairly pretty brief. But each biography is linked to a source down here, and even there's one, biographical sketches is one. There's genealogy of the first settlers of the Passaic Valley. I think that's how you say that. But notice that they're not grabbing everything. And that's important. So some people in our chat have said, no, do not copy and paste. Please don't copy and paste anything from Wikipedia. And I think it's important, again, to go back to what Andy's saying. If you've written a biography, then you can go ahead and write it there. Let's take that off screen real quick. But if it's coming from somebody else, use snippets. Just grab snippets. So I wanted to show you down here. Let me see if I zoom in. Does it make it easier to read? Yeah, a little bit. Okay. So land grants. Here's what's an example right here. Okay. So this was a land grant. And notice right here, there's a little bit of a snippet. So we can all talk about how to emphasize this as a little snippet from a document or a biography or something like that. But it is also cited, and that is what's important. So no, don't copy an entire biography. Correct me if I'm wrong, WikiTreeers. Let me go back to this profile. I believe that you can upload images. I don't see one on this profile right here, which is probably not helpful. But I believe you can upload images and, oh, there it is, and graphics. So there's no images right here. But you should be able to upload images and potentially upload a document if you've written it yourself. But I would just do snippets and then cite out to it.
And if it's already on the web, then you can put that hyperlink in there right to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let me put you back here for a second. And then what were some of there were some comments in here. I only post a Wikipedia link. I don't copy it for sure. For sure. What other comments did people have? Do you remember?
Well, Thomas mentions, the bio it's already published on Wikipedia. There's no reason to duplicate it. You aren't providing any new insight or interpretation, so just link to the bio. And that's a good point for not just Wikipedia, but any other website. That if all it is you're trying to put that information on there, put the link to that information. And if you want to add something to it, then like you said, cite specific parts of it, quote specific parts of it to add your commentary, but leave the original where it is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, hold on. I'm pulling up the next question when we get to it. All right. And then I like this comment that he said, the general rules, you should either write it yourself or merely link to the article. Perfect. Okay. Oh, and you can upload images. That was confirmed. Sorry, I'm reading this comment really quickly from Stacy. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. Oh, there's a bio for Stanley. Chris is a huge comic book fan, as you can tell, but I just like that. He put his own spin on it. Good job. All right, so if there's any other questions that you have about WikiTree, go ahead and drop them in today. Let's go ahead and pull up the second questions that people have. This one comes from D. Knight Leister. Is that how you say it? The question is there a reason people add Civil War pensions to individuals who died 20 years ago or 20 years prior to the war? What do you think, Andy?
I would say the only reason for that would be if they're mentioned in the pension. And usually that pension file is going to have some, different family history, maybe who the siblings or others are. And so in that case, that person might be a sibling that died young. And so they, weren't alive when the war happened, but they're mentioned in that pension file. And so now it becomes a record of their existence.
Right. Exactly. Some other people that show up in the pension files besides parents or siblings or children could also be a minister who may attest to the fact that someone was married by them. And if they're not alive, then sometimes, and I saw this recently in a video that I shared, it was related to the Civil War Pension Index. There was a daughter of the minister who consulted the records that they had and then did an affidavit. And so the pension file could actually be connected to the daughter because she's a witness, and then also to the father who was a minister. And it just helps put people in a time and place. So I can see a lot of that happening there. What would you say about if the person in the pension file is mentioned as the captain of the unit or any of the officers, Andy?
You're talking that those officers had died 20 years before the war?
Yeah, see, that wouldn't make any sense. I guess that wouldn't make any sense.
No, that wouldn't.
I guess my follow-up question would be, would you connect the Civil War pension file to an officer if they're just mentioned in the pension file, but they don't serve as a witness or anything like that?
I wouldn't, because then you'd really be connecting that pension file you'd be connecting hundreds of pension files to maybe a single officer. And it's sort of like the clerk that records a marriage. You don't attach that marriage record to the clerk,
right.
Unless it so happened that clerk was a family member. That clerk is just the person who was in charge of putting that record together. In this case, the officer he's the officer of the regiment, but he doesn't necessarily need every single pension file that all of the people underneath him, received attached to him. Now, on the other hand, if the pension file happened to have some story about the person in question that involved the officer that, gave you some more insight into the life of that person, that officer, then you could attach that pension file. You probably want to go put a note there on why you're attaching that pension file so that people don't think, why do you have this private pension file attached to the colonel of this unit that, he had 3,000 people underneath him? What's so important about this one pension file there? So,
right. And I think, Stace, you said it well. It depends if it was connected to the family in another way. Yeah, for sure. Or any kind of little story that helps you understand the character of that officer. Give you that backstory. That'd be great as well. All right. So the last pre-prepared question I have is this one, and it's going to be a little bit of a demonstration. It says, are you able to link uploaded documents to say that something backs up a certain relationship like it does with records from Ancestry? And that seems a little odd the way it was phrased, but this comes from the video about how do you link media to events in Ancestry. So give me just a second to set that up. It's a little bit easier in OBS to show. And when we're in the same location, it's easier to make the switch. Okay, so I've got Ancestry. And one of the things people are wanting to know is that, can you link images from your gallery to your facts? And the question is yes. What they also wanted to know is if you can upload documents and put it in a source and create the little purple lines. Do you see the lines and how they go up? And they're going to go talk about these facts. And if I click on that one, it talks about these facts and that person. And someone was asking, can you upload a document in that way? Well, what we've discovered is that if you click on edit a profile, if you want to attach a source, then these are the citations you've created. And the media, this is just if there's anything that you have uploaded, because there are images that are in the gallery. I'll go back here and show you the gallery right here. These images in the gallery are connected to these sources over here. So in a way, the image is already connected. Does that make sense?
So when you're uploading an image, do you have to create a source for it then?
That is correct. There's two things you can do. First, if you upload an image, so I'm just going to upload something really silly here that we all know it's not going to stick around, but I click on upload media. And let's say I'm going to put a real image. This is just a fake image. And so I'm going to make it say test so that I know to delete it. I can link it to lots of different people. It'll show up in their profile. Click done. And then let's say over in facts, let's just pretend it went with this fact. I click edit, attach media, and then I can attach, whoops, I hit the wrong button. You got to put the plus side beside it and click here, go to media, you can upload media from here. So you don't have to put it in the gallery, or you can just connect it from here. And so now that image goes with it. So you can do the same thing with a document. Let me go ahead and just, I don't want to, I'll undo it in a minute. I don't want to totally butcher everything live. Okay, so let's say you want to do a document. You can click upload media. I'm going to grab a document from my computer. And I'll also say this is test. But if I wanted to add it to another person, I can do the same thing. Which we have a video about doing this, but it's not coming up right now. There it is. Frank. So let's say it's to the both people. Great. So what that happens is the media is now in both of their profiles. But if I wanted to create the purple line thing, that's when you're going to have to create a source citation. So I'm just going to make a really, this is never one you'd actually want to do, but create new source. and I'm going to say research report. Of course, I can't type everything live correctly. And then I would fill out all of these fields, click save, and then I have to give a detail. Research report Devon. Okay, and when I come down here, I can connect it to the facts. So let's say that report validate the birth, the death, the name, the marriage, and any of the other items. I click submit, and now I have the citation, and the citation will create the purple lines, but the image is not attached to it, so I need to click on this again, go over to media, and now I can click that document into the profile. So that's how I can get the image linked to an event, or the document linked to an event, but also the citation. Any questions on that? Or is that pretty straightforward?
It's straightforward to me.
Okay. So you guys can go ahead and hit replay on that if you want to watch a slower click pattern. I know some people in previous videos have said that the click pattern is hard to follow, but that's why there's the watch it again, and there's also the ability to slow down the video using the YouTube settings. All right, so thanks, Anna, for telling me that was pretty straightforward. Okay, so there was a follow-up question. What about linking to another person in the tree side? So with the source citation, you have to, as far as I'm familiar, the source citation, you just need to add again and again, and then just repeat it for each person. But for the gallery view, when you upload an image or a document, you can link it to multiple people. So I hope that answers your question. Oh, this is a good point. Thanks, June. If you ever want to delete an image or a citation, they need to be removed separately. All right, good call. Thank you for letting us know. Okay, all right. You know, each platform has their advantages and disadvantages of uploading images and documents and citations and stuff like that. So make sure that you find the one that works for you. All right, so now that's all the questions I've pre-prepared. I'm going to scroll up to the beginning. I know there's one before this, so if you're watching live and your question was before David Walker's question right here, then post it again, because I'm not finding it. So Andy, in DNA Painter, parents galaxies apart, can you assume if a multi-segmented match has one segment, does it mean anyone who matches the other segments can be assigned to the same side of the family? Before you answer, try to help us understand the question a little bit better and then answer. And you should be able to share your screen if...
I can't share my screen, no.
Oh, okay.
I'm on a phone.
Okay.
So what I believe he's talking about here is you have a match that matches multiple segments with you, and you know that at least one of those segments is on a particular side of your family, because I'm guessing there are other matches that match that same segment as well. So let's say it's on your father's side. The question, I believe what you're asking is, so can you then assume that these other segments that you match with are also, that you find other matches that match those segments are also on that father's side? And in this case, I would say no, because there's still a very real possibility that they could be on your mother's side, and you could actually be related to this person through both of your sets of parents. You really have to look at each one of these segments for this relationship independently, and you'd have to validate that you know that this one segment is part of on your dad's side, you'd have to validate that these other segments are also on your dad's side. Now, depending on how many segments and how large they are, that might be just a matter of going back the 5 or 6 generations and verifying that no, there are no connections on your mother's side of the family. The only connection is this one connection on your father's side of the family. But until you've done something like that, or until you've identified these other segments with your father's side, then I wouldn't necessarily assume that they're on your father's side. The thing you could do to help that out is if you have first cousins that you're going to share a lot of DNA with on your father's side, then see if any of their segments happen to match up with these other segments on this match to be able to validate that.
Okay. You ready for number 2?
I saw one that I think you've passed over. This is from Mexican Fox 1.
Oh, yeah. See,
did you see that one?
I did. Let me see if I can find it. It might. Yeah, I knew it was there.
And her question is, how do I use shared matches?
Yes.
And this is sort of a follow-on to that last question. Shared matches is when you have you and another match, and it's a list of the people that both of you match. And so for probably most of your matches, the vast majority of them, unless your parents are somewhat related, you're probably only related to them on one side of your family. Now, there's going to be some that you are related to on both sides of your family. But the majority of them are likely going to be just related on one side of your family. So, for instance, if you take a look at a second cousin that you know is on your paternal side, and it's like your paternal grandfather's side, all of those matches that match both you and your second cousin, or not all of them, but almost all of them, are probably going to be related through that line. So it's a way to start to separate out how you're related. Now, the thing you have to be aware of with this is, just like with the other one, the other question, it's possible that this second cousin is related through this paternal grandfather of yours, but you are related to them through, let's say, your maternal side, and you don't realize that yet, just because you don't have your trees all lined up. This is where looking down at a segment level to see, okay, not just shared matches, but we share the same segment, can be important, because it's very rare that you're going to share the same segment with a shared match that you're sharing through different lines of relationship. That you're both going to go back to a single common ancestor that you're sharing that segment with. So that's really the use of shared matches, is to start to separate out who is related to which parts of your family.
All right. Ethnicity questions. How do I find sub-Saharan ancestry when it's only 2%? I've done 5 DNA tests and all confirmed they're 2%.
All right. So the fact that you're getting roughly the same percentages on all these different tests is probably good evidence that, yes, it's actually there. The question then becomes, how can you find it? Now, we have a video. It was called How Far Back is 3% Ethnicity, which 2% is almost 3%. So you can use that. And what I show you in there is, it's probably not worth your time to identify that, mainly because you're talking about, at 3%, something that could be, I believe it was like somewhere in 500 to 1,000 years before. So you're getting into the area where there might be no records at all. And that's the key with a lot of the using DNA, is it is a piece of evidence that you're using with other record evidence to identify a relationship. So if there's nothing else to back it up other than just the DNA, it's probably not going to be found. You really need to be looking at things that you have other records for. Now, that doesn't mean you should ignore it completely. It's something to keep in the back of your head. And as you're doing your research, if something comes up of, oh, there's a family story of, he, married an African or something like that. Well, okay, there's a good place now to focus your research on, now that you have this bit of evidence plus this other bit of family lore, to see if there's anything else there.
Awesome. Well, this one wasn't a question, but this is definitely one that I'm so excited to read. Anna Hart says, I'm working on my first biography story of my grandfather, thanks to Devon's excellent story advice on sensitive info. Papa had 2 families, so I had an uncle I never knew. And that video, if you want to watch it, it's part of our FHF Extra Channel membership. And so for a membership of $2.99 a month, you're able to see our deep dive trainings, our bonus webinars, as well as archives of live streams and other videos. And to get to that, you just click on the join button next to the subscribe button, and then YouTube takes care of the rest. And then this is when you can add in all the really fun emojis that people drop in, like the spreadsheet or the poll dark or the yes button and so on and so forth. But what I really wanted to celebrate, not so much as do a sales pitch, is Anna, I'm so excited that you're writing your family stories. You made my day by telling me I helped you out. So way to go, you. But Andy, what do you see as a potential challenge of writing a family story about families you, like in this case, they have the other family that they never knew about? What are some of the things that you would think that somebody would have to tackle if they're doing that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think the probably the biggest thing is source information. What information do you have to be starting to actually writing a story? And particularly when you're discovering this family that you don't know anything about, it's usually in that case, if there's nobody that's living that knew them, then you don't have any living people that have some maybe firsthand knowledge, and so all you're going off of is newspapers or other records of things that happened. And one of the things that you're not necessarily going to be able to do is actually get in the minds of those people as far as what they were feeling or thinking during that time. And so you got to do a lot of speculation in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My other thought was that it's almost writing 2 separate biographies, with the hinge point being when the second family was created, because when you have this one side that didn't know about the other and vice versa, if you try to put it in the normal chronology that I teach in a recipe for writing family history, you're actually going to confuse the story. So it's almost like you need to write a recipe for writing family history to the point where he left the family or whatever that hinge point was, and then do another story that has here. And then it's almost like books. One of the ones I'm thinking of is Heroes of Olympus by Rick Riordan. He follows multiple different characters, and each chapter is being on the shoulder of that main character. So it's almost like you have to merge 2 stories in one book, but you have to delineate it enough so people go, oh, okay. So he wasn't really a part of this, or this uncle wasn't a part of the family, but it's a part of that person's story. I hope that makes sense. Read a lot of fiction when they have multiple storylines going in, and you'll be able to draw some strength from that. All right. Question for Andy. What does it mean if your match does not share any of your ethnicities?
Means absolutely nothing.
Okay.
The way that ethnicity is calculated and how that's determined is completely separate and different than how matching is determined. Matching is actually a pretty straightforward process. You are looking at whatever chunk of DNA and seeing that you share everything in common, and that's a match. With ethnicity, you are looking at little tiny chunks of DNA, and you're comparing those little tiny chunks of DNA to thousands of other referenced little chunks of DNA in that area, and basically doing a statistical analysis to determine which group does this fit into with that. And so it's entirely possible to have a match that is a real match that does not share any of your ethnicities.
Okay. Ethnicity and matching, two different things. That's the short answer. Okay. So this is a two-part from Robert Bell, and it has to do with haplogroups. So on FTDNA, family tree DNA, for those who don't know the lingo, on FTDNA, they state that my haplogroup is RM198. In 23andMe, they state my haplogroup is RL664. FTDNA says that RL664 is lower than RM198, but 23andMe does not show RM198 is one of the links getting down to RL664. Sorry, all of this lingo is really very nerdy. But do you have any resource that explain why this is, or any understanding to explain why this is?
Yes, so there is a video about why me and my dad have a different haplogroup than my grandfather, his dad. But also why me and my brother-in-law have the same haplogroup, and whether or not we're actually related.
I think that's called why two men have different haplogroup or something.
Yeah. And so, you're touching on it here, but it all comes down to, well, two things here to separate out. One, why you have different haplogroups on the different sites, and that has to do with which SNPs they're actually testing on the different sites. Now, for instance, with family tree DNA, if you just were doing the Y test, they're not actually testing any SNPs. And so they're providing you a report based on their stirs of what typical haplogroup it is for that. With 23andMe, they're actually testing SNPs on your Y chromosome to be able to determine what it is, because each one of those SNPs is a mutation, and so each one of these little separate haplogroups is where one has mutated into a new haplogroup for that. Now, as to the second question of why it's not showing, so it's showing basically that R-M198 is a higher level on the tree. So let's use my hand, and we'll say that, hey, right here is RM198, and it just happened to go up and it branched off into several different groups. It's saying that L664 is one of those groups, but 23andMe doesn't show that, and that is because there are a couple of different naming conventions. And not everything has been converted over to the same naming convention as there is right now. So for instance, you can see with these, actually, both of these haplogroups are listed as R-L something or other. Whereas previously, haplogroups were in the format of an R1B1A1B2. Basically, as more and more haplogroups are discovered, and as all these branches were branching out, that R1B1A2, which was nice because it gave you the genesis of that haplogroup, you knew exactly what the previous one that it came from was starting to become really long. And so they switched over to this RL-664, this type of nomenclature, even though several of these other haplogroups were actually extremely popular, extremely well known, listed throughout the literature. And so in some cases, they kept some of these old nomenclatures currently in some of their trees, but in other trees, they didn't. And so, yeah, it's a big mess.
I hope that helps, Bob.
The key there is is with Y-DNA, there are, I think right now, several hundred, if not more than 1,000 different haplogroups that have been discovered already. And just because of the length of the Y-DNA, there's probably going to be a lot more.
All right.
Mitochondrial DNA is nice because it's really short. There's really only a limited number that there can be. And we've probably found almost all of them.
You ready for your next question?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Do you share more centimorgans than usual with a second or third cousin if that cousin's parents are distant cousins?
Maybe. The problem here, and the reason that, I guess, two parts, maybe, and you're probably not going to be able to know. The reason it's maybe is because it really depends on how much or how distant of cousins they are, and whether or not you receive those parts of DNA from both of your parents. Now, at the second to third cousin level as it is, you're already looking at 0 to about 400 centimorgans, which is a pretty broad range as far as what you can share. In this case, if we're talking about distant cousins that are fourth cousins or fifth cousins or even as close as third cousins, you're only talking about maybe adding 25 centimorgans, maybe 50 centimorgans extra. So if you know that your range could be between 0 and 400 centimorgans, and you're only adding 50 centimorgans extra, then really your range could be 0 to, let's say, 450 centimorgans, which means the vast majority of that range, that 50 centimorgans, is not really going to show up as anything different.
All righty.
Now, statistically, if we had 100, 1,000 instances of this, we could actually see some nice things to be able to point out, oh, this is what's happening. Most likely, though, you're not going to have 100 or 1,000 instances of this to be able to even look at that data.
Okay, so this is a two-parter, but the second part's a little bit further down. So I'll read this one and have to scroll.
Well, real quick, Devin. So Robert Bell has a comment there about the Y-DNA. That it is a big mess. That's what I figured. I didn't see an icon for that on our special icons. So we need to think about a big mess icon, because there's lots of things in genealogy that are a big mess.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is a two-parter from Quest. How common is it to have a third cousin not show up as a DNA match?
Stop right there. That's an easy question to answer. So let's answer that first. 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10 of your third cousins will not show up as a DNA match.
Oh, because this was the 90% I think we talked about this week.
Is that what we talked about this week, or is that? And that's one of the videos that I just recorded. But I think it is one that you put out this week.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I just remember the percentage thing. No, this week was how far back your cousins can go. I think this is another one that's coming up that you edited.
Okay. So that the first part answer, Chris, is 1 out of 10. So it's not uncommon. It's better than winning the lottery. But you're not going to, yeah, 1 out of 10 will not share DNA.
Okay. So my great aunt has a third cousin who doesn't match her DNA. Why? It's confirmed paper trail, second part. The match does not match others in the family, though. She just doesn't match my great aunt, dad, and myself.
And that's exactly what you will see. You've gotten that 1 out of 10. Congratulations. And this is really how you check it with the paper trail. You know, just having a paper trail to confirm it really doesn't confirm it, because those papers might be lying. However, what you have here is you have others in the family, I'm guessing other third cousins or, whatever, that do match with her or do match with this cousin. And that's just because of the randomness of DNA. Basically, if you added up all the other people that were roughly third cousins that match with her, you'll find that 9 of them share DNA with her, and 1 of them, your great-grandmother, doesn't, or great-aunt.
All right. Okay, this is a question, and I think they go together. So I'll show them, and then if you want me to show it again, just let me know. I just got my mother's FTDNA autosomal DNA test results. My father has been deceased since 1992. Should I use the phasing tool on GEDmatch to sort my DNA matches into my paternal side? This is the second part. My two sisters have submitted Ancestry DNA tests, but the results won't be available until Christmas. Do I need to do my sister's results to do effective phasing, or can I do it now? So I'll pull this one back up.
All right. So you can do it now because the phasing tool works off of your DNA plus a parent's DNA or both of your parents' DNA. So you have at least one parent here. So what that will do is that will give you two phase kits, one for your mom's side and one for your dad's side. And from that, then looking at your dad's side matches, those are the matches that are going to match on your dad's side. Now, you mentioned about your sisters having tested with Ancestry, and their results are going to be available after Christmas. That's fine. What you can do with you and your sister's results now is you can do something called visual phasing, where you'll be able to divide up your chromosomes not only by the parental side, but also by each one of your grandparents. And there's videos online about that
as well. So now this question from Stacy. Do you have any suggestions on writing a family history that takes over several generations? So this is one of those things that I was kind of alluding to with the person that had two families. He created two families. You can do something similar. Here's my suggestion. First, write a story for each central link in your generation. So if you're going to do mom for 4 generations, then you need to have a story written for mom 1, then mom 2, mom 3, and mom 4 up the line. And then you can then be creative. Sometimes you'll just put all 4 stories as chapters in a book. And sometimes you'll kind of weave in and out that what's happening with mom 1 in 1920 and what's happening in mom 2 in 1920. And they could be chapter 1, chapter 2. And now we're in 1930 and we're doing what's happening with one mom and another mom and another mom. So there's several ways to do it. But my best advice always is to write a story focused on mom 1, not necessarily the couple, but the person and their parents, spouses, children, and then go to the next generation and do the same. There will be some overlap. So in your final production of your book, you might create that overlap within various chapters. There's different ways to do that, but make sure you write each person's story separately so you can then see the overlap. And then when you get into the editing phase, that content development, that stuff that Andy was saying that I could kind of give you some feedback on, that's when you make it connect and more fluid. So I hope that helps for now, because I know Stacy is doing NaNoWriMo, but she's doing family history. So go Stacy. Kind of a caveat. All right. Chris had a question, and I don't know if you handled this. I have some cousins who link via paper trail who do have 1 to 3% Italian and French and are close cousins in the 1st to 4th cousin range. How is that possible?
Who are close cousins in the 1 to 4th cousin range. Okay. Well, first off, when you say close cousins in the 1st to 4th cousin range, that's actually a pretty broad range, because 1st cousins are sitting around 700 centimorgans, and 4th cousins are 0 to 50 centimorgans or so. So how is that possible? Well, if they're 4th cousins, the 1 to 3% Italian or French they share is right in line with how distant that is as far as possibilities. But overall, this goes back to the other thing we said, particularly once you get to distant cousins, when you're comparing the ethnicities, It's very easy to not share any ethnicity, even with somebody who you share some DNA with, and in some cases, some significant amount of DNA, simply because of how they calculate those ethnicities and versus how they calculate how a segment is shared.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this one seems to be a paper trail and a potentially a DNA question. My great-grandfather was German, came to America in the 1870s, was in 7th Cavalry in Dakota Territory. He had 3 children. I have no clue who his wife was. How can I find her?
Yeah,
From a paper trail aspect, one of the problems you're dealing with is territorial governments in the Western United States didn't always keep a lot of records because there weren't a lot of people out there. If he's in a cavalry, that could lead to potentiality for military service records, potentially pensions. But since it's after the Civil War, I know there's pensions after the Civil War. I'm not sure what records for territorial regiments there are. So that's one of the problems I see there. You're also dealing with these territorial governments that didn't start doing birth, marriage, and death records until way, way, way later. Your best chance is to look at land records, and you're looking at probate records and newspapers. Those are the 3 records that served those territorial governments and even early statehood for some of the countries like states like New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and so forth. So one of the problems you're dealing with is a lack of record availability. Your best bets are those 3: probate, lands, and newspapers. Sorry. Also court records, but court records can get a little tricky, but probate falls under court, so I'd always start with probate. What do you say from a DNA standpoint?
So there's some nice clues here that can be really helpful for DNA. So first off, you said that he was German, so from one of the German territories back then, came to America in the 1870s. So I'm assuming from that, without knowing anything more, that his parents and possibly his siblings might still be over in Germany, which, okay, that's fine. And he had 3 children there. So this is in the Americas, which means his wife, having 3 children, also had to be in America. Okay, so from this then, what we can do is we can see, since you know who these 3 children are, we can start to look at the matches and find out, okay, which of these matches can we actually trace back to these 3 children? So we're only talking about, in this case, one of those children is the grandparent of Marge. So only a couple of generations. So you probably might be able to identify who all of your matches that are related to one of those 3 children are, which is good because that's a starting point. Now, what we need to basically see, is there a significant amount of Germans here? Well, those Germans right now, with the information we have, are from that side of the family, from the great-grandfather side of the family. Now, we don't know anything about his wife, so we don't know if maybe she was from German descent or if she was from Swedish descent or something else. But in this case, seeing what common ethnicity results you have between all those people that you know are related to these 3 children, and then hopefully who their parents and their grandparents were in that, we know that we should see a lot of German within this. What we might be looking for then is some others. And in particular, when I see Dakota Territory, one of the things that I'm thinking is Scandinavian. There was a lot of Scandinavians that actually settled in that area. It looked somewhat like their homeland, and they were used to surviving in the cold, and that place was a cold, desolate place. So there was a lot of Swedish and Norwegian immigrants that came to the upper Midwest there. So I might be looking for that. But then also with your matches, then is you've identified the ones that you know how they're related. You've identified this group that are still in Germany that are probably related on that great grandfather side. So now it's a matter of looking at these other ones to see, do any of them have a common ancestor that happens to be in the upper Midwest there. And in particular, what you're probably going to be looking for is not necessarily the wife initially, because she, unless she had some other kids that they're descended from, it's really people who are siblings to the wife, people who are aunts to the wife, people who were cousins to the wife, that you might be looking 1 or 2 generations back to find where that common ancestor is. And so you know that you're related to that group of people by some common ancestor, and then it's a matter of doing some descendancy research from that common ancestor now to figure out who the possible wife of your great-grandfather could be. I know it sounds really easy, an afternoon of work maybe, or more.
Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions. Let me take this off first thing. We're going to take 2 more questions in the order that they came in. If we don't get to your questions, be sure to take that question and put it in the main comments section of the video, and we will put it in the queue for future videos and so forth. We want to make sure that we're answering lots of your questions, but Andy has to get on the road to come home. So 2 more questions.
Oh, real quick, Ascertain also asked, weren't there a lot of Germans from Russia that were in that area? Yes, there were. A lot of Germans that had moved to some parts of Russia, and one of the places they immigrated was actually that North Dakota, Minnesota border. Because I have a friend that his ancestors were from there, and it always confused him because, they always spoke German, but they said they were from Russia. And when you look at the migration history, yes, they were Germans that had moved to Russia and then later migrated to the United States.
Yes, and I know that to be true because there's the Geislers in America, and Kevin Geisler, he's unfortunately passed away. He's younger than me, which is why I'm saying so unfortunately, but he was a great genealogist, and he researched all of the Geislers in North Dakota, and I don't link in because they were Germans who went to Russia that came over. I'm like, okay, so Dan's question. What online program is best so all family members can contribute to the family tree, living and deceased? The problem I see is living are not usually displayed. I need help with all the living branches. So living, family search is not going to be helpful to you because only you can see what you add to the family unless you want to just have a common user ID and login. And I think that actually might be part of against their terms of service. So that's not going to be helpful. Almost every program that I know of, because of privacy laws, don't allow that information. However, I do remember that MyHeritage allows you to create a tree and you can invite people to contribute to the tree in a private space. I would advise you to do a Google search on that and look at the frequently asked questions to MyHeritage. But I do believe because what they do is say, what is this person's email when you have a living person and you can contact them. But Andy, what do you think?
Well, I thought with Ancestry, when you share trees, are you not allowed to see the living people, or do you not have a way of contributing to somebody else's tree on Ancestry?
I hadn't thought of it that way either. You can change contributing settings, can't you?
I thought so. I haven't used it in a long time that way, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. My problem is I know there's you can speak to it. Let me tell you my thoughts. I don't like putting a lot of information about living people in my online trees. I'd rather have them in my Roots Magic tree or my genealogy software and maybe sharing that privately with everybody. It can be kind of a problem to make sure everybody has that same program. But I don't want to be responsible for somebody's identity and secrets and all that stuff to be shared online. Granted, our marriage certificate is available online. I went and I got a hint from Ancestry. I'm like, oh, that's my marriage certificate. So a lot of our information is online. I want Ancestry to be blamed and the county courthouse that provided that to be blamed, not me. So I understand trying to collaborate, but I'm not necessarily sure that even if you could do the privacy settings for Ancestry and MyHeritage, I'm not entirely sure that I would. What do you think? You're the one who is more about online stuff than I am.
Well, but I don't do it with living people, so.
Oh. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so there's different platforms that say living people can be restricted. You can choose to let people see living when you give people access to your tree. I think that's level. Don't let living access, but for some people I do closely related. If you invite someone.
So real quick then, so it sounds like with Ancestry and MyHeritage, both of those you can. With WikiTree and Family Search, since they are both open trees for everybody, you can't see living people, correct? So
Yeah. Oh, I did look at this. There is Family Echo, and that is a way to share trees, but it's relatively small, and I don't know enough about it, but I do mention it in what platforms to create a fictional family tree. So I have seen that before. So in the community, they're telling you it does let you have commuters and give them access to living folks. I'm just uncomfortable doing that. And it sounds like you are as well, correct?
I just don't.
You just don't. There was one final question. It was John's. Here we go. All right. I have a DNA match of 16 centimorgans on Ancestry. Our mutual ancestor is a third great grandfather born in 1802. Is there a way to tell if she is a full fourth cousin or a half because James married at least twice?
Not from the DNA by itself. Because of, again, the broad spread and particularly how small the amount is at that point, you're not going to be able to tell whether they were a full fourth cousin or half. Now, if you had, let's say, enough siblings or cousins, first cousins, that you could do, and I'm talking probably 20 or 30, I'm not talking about one or two, then you could statistically see that, hey, a fourth cousin, I should share with half of them, and this person shares with half of these known people who should be fourth cousins with them. They're a full fourth cousin. On the other hand, if you find out that, oh, they only share with about a quarter of them, well, then that's really a half fourth cousin, most likely. Really the only way is to go back another generation, or not necessarily go back a generation, but to see whether or not that the segment that you share is from that person or from their wife. Because usually when we're talking about a shared recent common ancestor, we're actually talking about a couple that we've identified, or in the case of a half cousin, you're talking about an individual. And so in this case, if you have some other matches that you have triangulated that segment to be able to show that, yeah, it is from this person, then as opposed to the other person, then what you could do is you could show that, no, this person is actually you could show that this person is what am I trying to say? You wouldn't be able to disprove that they were a half cousin unless you could show that this was only through that great grandfather, that third great grandfather, and not through his wife at all. I'm thinking while I'm going through my head of what it would look like as far as showing this, and it would be very difficult. That's all I can say right now. Is you're going to need a lot of matches to be able to show that it is a fourth cousin as opposed to a half cousin with the information that you've given right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining our live stream Q&A. We always love to see what's on your minds and answer all of those questions. Hopefully this video won't get deleted like the past 2 live streams got messed up on YouTube, and Andy's just now going, what? Yeah, I know. So I'm hoping that it'll be there and there won't be any problems. And be sure to sign up for our newsletter so you know when we go live. The more people that tune into our videos as soon as they play, both on the live streams, the better it helps our company continue to grow and to serve you better. And now it's time for Andy to get on the road and get back to New Mexico. And for me,
actually, still a couple of hours before I do.
Anyway, we'll see. We'll see you later. Have a blessed day.
Hey, Devon, real quick, why don't you download the video from YouTube as soon as it's available to download? So that way, if it gets destroyed, then you can throw it back up there.
Yeah, that's what I learned after my Roots Magic interview. All right. See